I keep a log, not the official one. The archive has its own system, its own timestamps, its own version of what happened. I mean a personal log, a text file on my desktop that I update at the start and end of every shift. Date, time, what I worked on, any anomalies worth noting. I've kept it for 11 years. In 11 years, the anomaly column has stayed clean. I opened it on a Tuesday morning, typed the date, typed the time. Then I opened the archive database to check what had processed overnight. I counted the entries in the modification log. Then I counted them again. 74 records had been updated. I looked at the timestamp on every single change. 3:17 a.m. I had left the building at 7:12 p.m. the evening before. The first thing I did was what I always do when numbers don't match. I built a table. I exported the modification log to a spreadsheet, 74 entries. Each one listed the same change, field condition updated from whatever it had been before. Poor, fair, degraded, requires assessment. All of them changed to the same thing. Excellent. Transfer complete. I cross-referenced against the digitization queue. None of these recordings were scheduled. None of them had been assigned, approved, or touched. I sent a query to IT at 9:04 a.m. Their response came at 11:23. No anomalies detected. System operating normally. Modification log reflects standard automated maintenance processes. I wrote back and asked which automated process updates the condition field. They haven't responded to that one. I went to the stacks. I pulled 7 of the modified reels at random. I held them under the workroom light. I looked at the oxide surface. I can't give you a measurement. There's no formal metric for what I was seeing. But I've spent 15 years handling magnetic tape in various states of decay. These reels looked different, not new, something else. Like they had been used recently, carefully, and put back. I returned them to their slots. Back at my workstation, I opened one of the modified database entries at random. A weather forecast program, 1958. 12 minutes. Originally cataloged in poor condition. Field condition, excellent. Transfer, complete. I had digitized 1 recording. The system said 74 had been transferred. I sorted the full list by year, 1952, 1958, 1963, 1967. The years felt familiar. I spent enough time with this collection that most of the dates are lodged somewhere in the back of my mind. Then I noticed something in the distribution I couldn't explain away. Every reel I had identified as voice active, every recording where I had isolated the signal in the pauses, was on the list. Not some of them, all of them. At 4:15 p.m., I made a decision I've been trying to understand since. I picked one of the 74 reels at random, not one I recognized from the voice-active sessions. A program from 1958 I hadn't worked with before. A cultural affairs broadcast, 31 minutes, an interview with a local historian about the city's port industry. Unremarkable, not on any prioritization list. I ran it through the standard workflow, cleaned the heads, set the levels, let it play. The recording was clear. Clearer than it had any right to be for a 66-year-old tape, stored in conditions I know weren't ideal before the 1980s renovation. The interview played through without dropout, without the flutter you expect from oxide that's been sitting in a cabinet for decades. The historian spoke. The interviewer responded. There were pauses between their exchanges, natural ones, conversational ones, the kind where one person finishes a thought and the other decides whether they've finished. I ran the spectral analysis on the pauses. Nothing. No signal above the noise floor. No presence in the frequency range I'd learned to look for. The silence was clean. I sat with that for longer than I should have. Here's what I know about the recordings I've worked with. The ones that contain the voice are not quiet in their silences. There is something in the pause, a density, a quality I can't measure with the tools I have, but can hear once you've trained yourself to listen for it. A weight that isn't noise. The 1967 reels have it. The 1952 reels have it. Even the ones where the voice doesn't speak, where I've isolated the frequency and found nothing, still carry that quality. Like a room that's been occupied recently, like the air hasn't settled yet. This reel from 1958 was different. The pauses were empty, genuinely empty, not waiting, not watching. Just air between words, the way silence is supposed to be and almost never is once you've spent enough time listening for what lives in it. I don't know if that's better or worse. I wrote both possibilities in my personal log and couldn't decide. A reel, the system says, has been transferred. Transferred to what? And the pauses inside it feel vacated. I put it back. I didn't play any of the others. The cataloging files for the HBC collection are kept in a separate cabinet. Physical documents, pre-digital. I'd been through them once before when I first started work on the 1952 reels. Standard orientation. I hadn't looked closely. I went back on Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I was looking for something that predated the database. The folders are organized by acquisition year. The HBC collection was received in 1971. I pulled the folder. Between the acquisition summary and the condition assessment form, there was a folder that shouldn't have been there. Same color, same wear. But the label was handwritten where the others were typed. Inside, inventory sheets, 17 pages. Each sheet covered 30 reels. Reel number, format, recorded date, program type, and a condition column with a handwritten rating. The handwriting was precise. No embellishments. Each entry exactly as much information as the form required, and no more. The name at the top of the first sheet, Ruth Callow, Government Archivist, HBC Collection Intake, 1971. I read through the first 3 pages. Ruth Callow's system was precise. Reel number, format, date, program type, condition. 5 ratings: poor, fair, good, excellent. And one I hadn't seen in any other document from this period. A single word she must have invented herself. Uncertain. She used it 7 times across the first 3 pages. Always on reels from the 1950s, never with an explanation, just the word, and then the next entry, the same handwriting continuing, as if nothing unusual had been recorded. I made a note to come back to those entries. I kept reading. On page 4, I found the first anomaly. One reel appeared twice. Same reel number. Same program date. Different condition rating. First entry.
Fair. Some oxide loss. Playback possible with care.
Second entry, 3 days later, in the same handwriting.
Good. Oxide stable. Playback recommended.
I checked the remaining pages. 11 more reels appeared twice. Always the same pattern. A lower rating, then 3 days later, a higher one. Always better, never worse. Ruth had added reassessment dates in the margins. There was no column for them. She created her own notation. I read her entries as I worked through the pages. Her voice, the voice I assembled from those dry official phrases, was flat, methodical, without alarm. She was documenting what she found. She was being a professional. On the last completed sheet, beside reel number 47, she had written something outside the column structure. One line, no label, no date.
I played it twice. The second time it was already different.
The remaining 6 pages were blank. Personnel files for former staff are held in the administrative wing. I submitted a records request at 3:45 p.m. The file was on my desk by 4:30. Ruth Callow, Government Archivist, Grade 3, employed at the National Radio Archive from March 1969 to November 1971. The HBC intake was her final assignment. Reason for departure, personal circumstances. No forwarding contact. No reference letters. Unusual for a grade 3. No disciplinary record either. A clean employment history that stopped. I read the file 3 times, not because it was long, it was 4 pages. Employment details, assignment history, a performance review from 1970, and an exit form. What wasn't there was more interesting than what was. No exit interview. The archive conducted exit interviews as standard practice from 1968 onward. I know this because the procedure is documented, and I've seen the forms for other staff who left in the same period. Ruth Callow's file had no exit interview record. Either one wasn't conducted, or it wasn't filed, or it was removed. Her assignment history showed she had worked on 4 projects in 2 years. The HBC intake was her 4th and final assignment. She began it in September 1971. The completion date was left blank. She resigned before the column could be filled. I noticed something else. Her assignment to the HBC intake was dated the 1st of September. The collection had been received in March. It had sat unprocessed for 6 months before Ruth was assigned to it. The archive's standard practice was to begin intake cataloging within 30 days of acquisition. There was no staffing note, no resource constraint, no record of why a newly acquired collection of nearly 3,000 reels sat in the receiving room from March to September, with no one assigned to it. Then Ruth Callow was assigned. She worked for 6 weeks. She resigned. And 2 weeks after her resignation, the HBC collection was declared cataloged and transferred to the main stacks. She hadn't finished. The blank completion date said she hadn't finished, but the collection was declared complete. I ran her name through the digital catalog. One result: an annotation on a 1952 reel, added not by Ruth, by a different staff member in 1981, 10 years after she left. The annotation read,
Per our Callow recommendation, do not attempt playback without specialist consultation.
the reel HBC-195 1-0 1-0 7-P ROG01. I read that twice. Ruth Callow left the archive in November 1971. Someone had relayed her recommendation to the catalog in 1981. The recommendation concerned the reel I had played 4 nights ago. She knew about it. She had left instructions. I had not read them. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because precision is what I have. It wasn't fear. It was the specific sensation of realizing that a system I thought I understood had more variables than I had accounted for. That the problem I was solving was older than I knew. Ruth Callow had worked with these reels 50 years ago. She had noticed what I noticed. She had left, and she had left a note. I put the 2 lists side by side. I'd printed them both. The modified database entries from Tuesday, 74 lines, each with a real number, a recorded year, a program type, and the updated condition field. And Ruth Callow's reassessment notations. The reel she'd rated twice, transcribed from her inventory sheets onto a fresh page in my handwriting, because her originals were too fragile to keep unfolding. I started at the top of both lists and worked down. The first reel on the database list, HBC-195 2-07-03-PROG12. I found it in Ruth's notations on line 4. First assessment, fair. Second assessment, 3 days later, good. The second reel, HBC-195 2-1-1-18-PROG02. Ruth's notations, line 9. First, degraded, handle with care. Second, fair, stable. I worked through 15 entries before I stopped checking. It wasn't that I was certain by the 6th entry. But I kept going because certainty felt like something that needed to be earned slowly on a Tuesday evening, with the building mostly empty and the eastern corridor quiet. By line 15, the pattern was absolute. Every reel on the database list appeared in Ruth's notations. Every reel in Ruth's notations appeared on the database list. The proportions matched. Ruth had reassessed 31% of the collection. 74 records out of the archive's current holdings of 238 HBC reels was 31%. I sat with the arithmetic for a moment. Ruth Callow had done this in 1971 with a clipboard and handwritten sheets. Whatever had happened Tuesday night had done it with a database. Same selection, same scope, same reels. They were not similar. They were identical. Whatever had happened to those reels in 1971 had happened again. And I wrote this in my personal log and then deleted it and then wrote it again. It had never stopped. The same process, measured twice, 50 years apart. Ruth saw it at the midpoint. I saw it again. I was still looking at the 2 lists when I noticed something on her final inventory sheet that I had missed earlier. Bottom right corner, very faint pencil, almost gone. I thought it was a page number at first. It was a date. 3 days after the date of her last entry. The date on which, as far as I could determine from the personnel file, she had submitted her resignation. She had written it on the sheet before she left, before she knew she was leaving, or she had come back. I don't know which is worse. I went back to the personnel file that evening. The emergency contact field was empty. I had checked it in the afternoon. Standard form, standard blank. But the digital scan of the file, the one uploaded to the system during a records digitization project in 2014, had a metadata panel. I looked at it now. Field, last modified. Date, March 1983. Someone had written something into the emergency contact field in March 1983, and then deleted it. The OCR layer retained the ghost of it. 2 words.
Ask Martin.
I was born in September 1984. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't write it in my personal log. I opened a separate file, unnamed, and typed the date in March 1983 when someone had written my name into a field and then removed it. 18 months before I existed. I don't know what Ruth Callow heard on those reels. I don't know who wrote my name or why they deleted it. I don't know what transfer complete means for 74 recordings that no one digitized. What I know is this. The lamp in the eastern corridor has not flickered since Tuesday morning, and I haven't opened any of the 74 files. Not yet.